By this point, we hope you're wondering what flies are being fished and in what positions they are placed on the cast of flies. We had Davy Wotton and Gary Taylor sit down and look at some patterns and where they might be placed in the cast. Davy has decades of experience as an angler and guide, so he will make this decision based upon any number of factors. What he hopes to give you in this demonstration is a starting point, and believes that in time you will develop your own preferences for creating a cast of flies. What we have laid out are 3 groups of flies, one for each position on a cast, and another bunch that are a general selection of soft hackles. The soft hackles might be used anywhere in the cast, but most often are in the middle position. In general terms, the last fly in the cast, one that is deepest in the water and holds the whole system in place, is called the anchor fly, or it's called the tail fly. It is an anchor when you're fishing a little deeper and the fly is a little bigger, and it's called the tail fly in the instances when you're fishing a lighter team of patterns and concentrating in the film or above the surface. The middle fly is the most consistently termed and is referred to as the middle dropper. The top fly, or the one that dances on the water, is the top fly or the top dropper. So that's your entire cast of flies that we'll call the top dropper, middle dropper, and the anchor or tail fly. The rules are not hard and fast, but in general, the anchor fly is usually some kind of attractor pattern. That is, it might not represent a food source, but it brings attention to your casts. It also could have a little more bulk and size so that it pushes water and holds everything in place. Should your angling regulations allow only for 2 flies, the anchor fly could even be replaced with a very small shot. The middle dropper is often a deceiver, meaning it looks something like an insect or invertebrate that the trout might be feeding on. A good selection in this position is an emerger, since this is exactly what the middle dropper most often appears to be doing when fished. The top dropper is more commonly a direct imitation of some insect. It looks exactly like a natural the trout might be taking. Traditionally, this has been a winged wet fly, but could be a conventional dry pattern as well. It is just on the surface film or dancing above it, and it can be taken as an emerger or even a dun. Many caddis and midges dive back in the water to deposit eggs, so they can make a good top dropper choice as well.
How do you choose when and where and why, most importantly, to use which fly on top and which one on the bottom?
Yeah, a lot of that's based on experience to some extent and the prevailing conditions at the time of fishing. You know, is there any evidence of surface feeding activity related to a hatch or terrestrial fall or whatever the case may be? The light conditions that prevail at that time, it's a real bright day, a kind of middle kind of region, or it's a real dark day. The kind of water you're fishing, is it real clear water? Has it got a bit of colour in it? That kind of, so all those things are part of that equation to make the decision, if you know what I mean, as far as which fly I would use. However, to make things more simple, there are certain flies that generally work better at given positions on a 3-fly setup. These flies here, typically I would use on the tail, i.e. the end fly. They are by definition what we call more attractor flies. In other words, they got color orientations about them that, you know, a fish will easily see.
Have a bit more material. They've got a collar hackle, or in this case, a deer hair head. It's like they push a lot of water.
Yeah, they do. That's the whole object of it. The nature of the tine of the fly allows you to work that fly so it creates surface disturbance, either just before it gets into it, in it, or just off the surface of it.
So basically it gets the fish's attention.
You bet
right?
It does.
An attractor pattern, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then there's another kind of class which I would call that are more deceivers. Wet flies, so to speak, by definition of this kind of category, really do not, or are not tied to directly imitate a natural food source by definition of the fact, as you would know, you know, with a mayfly or a nymph, whatever the case may be. But it doesn't matter. You know, they contain orientations of caricature, size, color, this, that, and the other, that trigger the response off from that fish to take that fly. And ultimately, that's what you do with a pheasant tail nymph anyway. You trigger off that response to that fish's perception that it's a real food source, and it takes it. And there's really no difference where wet flies are concerned, other than the understanding of certain flies used in prevailing conditions are more likely to get you a positive response than others. So really these kind of flies here are what I would call kind of like in the deceiver class, if that's the way to explain one to you. They contain elements that have got some relationship to natural insects, whether it's by color orientation, the fact they got wings, and kind of just things like that. And then flies that I would choose to fish on the top dropper position would be orientated to some extent, again related to conditions, but what I aim to do with those flies that I set on the top position is to make those fish move up from a given depth and believe that that fly is moving in such a way it's a real insect. And the color orientation I would use would again be related to the prevailing conditions, kind of a light fly, light day basis, dark fly, dark day, and there's most definitely an element of truth in that, because the visual aspects of the fish's eye to be able to see it are greater or lesser depending.
What about current speed?
I don't necessarily make a serious consideration about what fly we're using in relation to the current speed. That's more a related factor to the actual technique of fishing that fly. In other words, if I was fishing fast water and I just throw those flies across the stream, well, of course, instantly they're dragged downstream. But if, however, I offer various degrees of correction and technique of fishing, I can make those flies work real slow, and the fish get a good eye view of them, and more likely they'll come up to take them. But typically, to kind of simplify that, as you see, most of these flies I use on top dropper positions contain a lot of material by definition. There's a lot of hackle. This, for example, is a palmate bodied fly. This is a palmate bodied fly, also got a wing. This is palmate body. Of course, this fly's got a deer hair head.
It's like it would push a lot of water.
Yeah, it does. That's exactly what you want it to do. You want it to move water as the fly is actually tracking up into the surface film, through it, and eventually when you lift it off. And that's a trigger. There's no question about that. It is a trigger, as you well seen. So really within the visible spectrum, if that's the way I explain it to you, of these kind of flies, every kind of thing you can think of, you can effectively, in some way, shape, form or other, represent and by the method of fishing, imitate to some extent how that natural creature is seen to the fish's eyes. Or at least we believe it to be that the case. But it must be somewhat related, because to take the flies, they should do it right.
Related enough that we spanked the fish yesterday using this technique.
Oh yeah. You get it right, you can have some awful good fun, let me tell you.
Yes. Davy, I see a fourth group of what I would classify as your typical soft tackles. Where and when would you use those?
I really love to fish soft tackle flies. Historically they've been around for a very long time. I think I may just say this, there's a common kind of mistake, if that's the way to explain it, one that soft tackles have to be cast across stream and stripped back. Well, that ain't really the right way to fish.
I think
a
we're
soft tackle.
mistaught. We're mistaught as Americans
to
fish
I
only
don't
that
really
way.
know how that came around, to be honest about it, but soft tackles will generally work better fished in dead drift modes, and that allows every kind of whim of movement in that water column to activate and move those hackles around. And as far as I'm concerned, they're just about some of the best imitations of emergers you can ever use. And at times I will use 3 of those.
Really?
Yeah. And other times I'll use them in combinations with some of the other more, what I would call classic style wet flies. The only thing I will say to you is that if you use, for example, a beadhead nymph, it's effectively a subsurface fish fly, but it's not going to work the same as one of those kind of flies.
There's no movement.
No,
No
it's
line.
basically an inert fly that's just moving through the water column at some degree of angle and or speed.
All right. I'm
Whereas
beginning to see your point, yeah.
wet flies, as you know, demand that you work those flies. It's not just a question of chuck and chance it.